I was looking down at myself, and the white suit had turned gray. I was lying in a grease puddle in the parking lot, and I was thinking to myself, get up, get up. You're ruining your new clothes, and look at your shoes. Just get up. What are you doing? And then it just hit me. I'm not going to get up because I'm dead. That's it. And as soon as I realized that, a light appeared to my right and above me. And this light it was alive. There was an energy to it, like a life energy. And it wanted me to follow it.
Welcome back. I am so happy to bring you Elizabeth Krohn today. Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me on, Tia. It was September of 1988, so it's been quite a while. I think 35 years, maybe. It had been a sunny day. I live in Houston, Texas, and so it was still summer. It was still hot and had been sunny all day. And it was a Friday, and I had decided I was going to take my two young children. At the time, I was 28 years old, and I had a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and my husband was out of town on a business trip, and I was going to take my two children to our synagogue that evening for services because it was the first anniversary of the death of my grandfather. And in the Jewish faith, each anniversary, the names of the deceased are read at services. So I wanted to be there to hear his name. And so I got the boys all dressed up in their little suits. They looked so cute. And I got myself dressed. I had bought a new suit. Actually, it was a black and white suit, mostly white. I bought the most beautiful pair of new shoes. And that there's a reason I say that. Anyway, because we were cleaned up and dressed up, I decided I was going to take a picture of the three of us before we left. I had a new camera I wanted to try out. So I set it up on a tripod, and because the boys were very active and being 2 and 4 years old, it took a few minutes, and it caused us to be running a little bit late to services. But I did get the picture, and I'm so glad I did, because when I look at that photo now, that photo was maybe 30 minutes before my near-death experience, and I see a totally different person in that picture. And people that know me really well can also see it. There's something in my eyes that is different now than it was in that photo. Anyway, I put the kids in the car and we drove over to the synagogue, which is near the Texas Medical Center, which is a huge medical complex. And I pulled in the parking lot, and as soon as I turned into the parking lot, there was, out of nowhere, this massive black rain cloud appeared over my car. It was very localized, and I guess it was over the parking lot. And it started raining, like just torrential rain that was coming down in sheets. And there was thunder and lightning, and it was just a very violent seeming storm out of nowhere. And because we were running late, I didn't want to sit in the car with the boys and wait for the rain to pass, because I thought the whole purpose of us being here was to hear his name read, and I didn't want to miss it. I knew that my entire family, extended family, was there. They we were all going for the same reason. And so I told my 4-year-old to get out of the car and to run to the door of the synagogue. There was an awning over the door. And I told him to wait there until I got there with his brother. So he did, and I watched him run over there, and he made it fine. And I climbed over the seat of the car into the back to get my 2-year-old out of his car seat. And I grabbed an umbrella that I had in the car, and I opened the car door and stepped out. And I realized immediately that the wind was pretty severe, and I wasn't going to be able to handle the umbrella in my purse if I was carrying my son. So I put him on the ground and I held his hand with my right hand. And we started walking, and I was holding the umbrella, and I was holding it very high on the shaft of the umbrella. So my hand was almost all the way up to the top, and I was holding it down very low to my head. And we took a few steps, and I glanced at my hand, and I thought, oh, wow, my wedding ring is touching the metal, and there was a lot of lightning. And I thought, this is not a good idea. I should let go of the umbrella. And as soon as I thought, just let go, just get wet. As soon as I thought I should let go, a tiny little tine of lightning touched the tip of the umbrella. And I know this because someone saw it happen, and he told us later that there was a larger bolt, and this was like a little branch coming off that large bolt, and it just touched the tip of the umbrella. And it didn't knock me out or anything, but what it did was it paralyzed my hand. I couldn't open my hand to let go of the umbrella. I was stuck. I couldn't move my arm, and I couldn't move my hand. And I was getting very upset. And then almost immediately, a larger bolt of lightning hit the umbrella. And that definitely knocked me out. And that was the beginning of my near-death experience. That lightning struck. The next thing I knew, Andy, my 2-year-old, was screaming, and he had his hands up against his ears. I found out later that it's because his eardrums had burst when the lightning struck. So he was in a lot of pain. And Jeremy, my 4-year-old, had seen the whole thing happen, and he started running back out toward us. And I thought I was fine. And I was watching Jeremy run back out toward us, and I was angry. I was like, I told him to stay there. What is he doing? He was also screaming, and he ran over and he grabbed his brother and started pulling him toward the building. And I thought, this is bizarre, but I followed them, and we got to the building, and we went inside the lobby. Both boys were still screaming. We're now standing, the three of us are in the lobby, and there was a man walking toward services. I guess he had come from a restroom or something, but it was someone we knew who knew us. And he came over to see why the boys were screaming. And he was talking to them, and I was thinking, why is he ignoring me? I'm right here. Why is he just talking to a 2-year-old when I'm standing right here? And I thought, where's my umbrella? I knew I had an umbrella, so I looked out the window, and I saw the umbrella in the parking lot, and it was like a skeleton of an umbrella. It was just the metal part, and there was smoke coming off it. And I looked to the right a little bit because there was something that caught my eye in the parking lot. and it was like this heap in the parking lot. And I realized it was me. And I noticed that my feet were sticking out from the bottom of my shoes, those brand new shoes that I had loved so much. The soles were gone from the shoes and my feet were sticking out. And I was so disoriented. What is going on? So I looked down at my feet there inside the building to see, because I was looking at them outside, and I looked down and they were fine. The shoes were perfect. They were on my feet and they were perfect. The only problem was I was hovering 3 or 4 inches above the floor. My feet were not on the floor. And I was just so disoriented. Meanwhile, the man that had been talking to my kids had run into the room where services were, and he had interrupted. And from the back of the room, he said, "We need a doctor." Now, this is a synagogue, a block from a major medical center. And so there were like 40 men stood up, and it came toward the back of the room. And somehow I saw that happening. I wasn't in the room. I thought I was in the lobby, but I saw it happen. And I knew that my parents were there and that they would take care of my kids. So I decided I wanted to go outside and see what the deal was out there. And as soon as I thought I wanted to go look at myself, I was there. I was above myself, and I was looking down at myself, and the white suit had turned gray. I was lying in a grease puddle in the parking lot, and I was thinking to myself, get up, you're ruining your new clothes, and look at your shoes, just get up, what are you doing? And then it just hit me. I'm not going to get up because I'm dead. That's it. And as soon as I realized that, a light appeared to my right and above me. And this light was alive. There was an energy to it, like a life energy. And it wanted me to follow it. And so I thought, I have nothing to lose. I'll go because I'm dead. My kids are okay. I'm going to go. So I followed this light, and it led me to a place that I call the garden. And this garden was not like any garden that I've ever seen here on Earth. The colors and plants, and it was indescribable, the beauty of this place. But even more than how beautiful it was, the overwhelming sense of unconditional love that I felt. And I thought I knew what unconditional love was. I had children. That's unconditional love, I thought. And it is. But it's a different kind of love, and it's much, I don't want to say stronger, but it is. It's more powerful. It's more consuming. And it surrounded me. It was inside me. It was everywhere. And I heard a voice say, sit down on the bench. There was a bench there, and the bench was very ornate. It was like hand carved. It was a garden bench, but it was extremely gorgeous. And the voice that told me to sit on the bench was the voice of my grandfather, who we had been at services to hear his name read. He had died a year earlier. And I knew it was his voice because he had a heavy French accent, and I'd know his voice. I knew it was his. And I sat down on the bench, and he sat down next to me. And as I sat there, I was on that bench for 2 weeks, sitting with him and talking. I came to understand that it was not my grandfather that was sitting with me. It was God. And I think he was using my grandfather's voice to put me at ease so that I wouldn't be terrified about what was happening. He told me that he was going to answer any questions I had and talk to me telepathically, that he wasn't going to, I wouldn't hear his voice again because he didn't want to disturb the other sounds that I was hearing, which were the most incredible music. And I don't know what kind of music. It was not anything I've ever heard before or since, at least not in this lifetime. He proceeded to answer all of my questions, and I received, it was like an instantaneous download of information. Like all the answers were just right there. I didn't have to ask any more questions. I had all the answers. And he told me that I could choose to stay there if I wanted to. And if I chose to stay there, I would follow this. There was a path through the garden that led to a mountain range off to the right. And that light that I had followed to the garden had moved beyond the mountains. So the mountains were backlit by this light. And the path led to those mountains. And he said if I decided to stay, I would go down that path and I would go beyond the mountains, and that would be a final decision, that there's no coming back. But I could also choose to go back now and finish this lifetime. I clearly did not know what I wanted to do because my initial thought was, why would I leave here? That's perfection. This is incredible. When I sat on that bench, this wooden bench morphed around me. It conformed to my body, if I had a body, which I don't know. But it was the most comfortable and comforting place I had ever been. I also have to say that in addition to the love that I felt there and the beauty of the place, I had the sense that I was back, like that I had been there before and now I'm back. That was home. And it made me feel like this place where we all are now is temporary. This is not home. That's home. And I couldn't imagine why I would want to go back to this life if I was there. And he let me know that he was going to help me make that decision by giving me information about my family and my life and how things might unfold if I decided to come back. He told me that I would be facing a divorce if I came back, At that point, my husband and I had been married for 8 years, and we were happy. There was no reason for me to think there might be a divorce. And he told me that because of this experience, what was happening to me, that if I did go back, I wouldn't be the same person that I had been. And that would be difficult for my husband. It was also difficult for me, but I couldn't leave, right? I was stuck in myself. So there would be a divorce. And he also said that I would have a third child, a daughter, and that she had already selected me as her mother. And that was the first time. Before this, I was 28 years old. I had never thought about reincarnation. I had never thought about the afterlife. All of this was so foreign to me at that point. And I wasn't a mean person, but if someone had said to me, there's an afterlife and you don't really die, your soul lives on and you're just in a different place, you're in a different dimension, I would have laughed. I would have said, that is so ridiculous. When you die, that's it. It's over. And I finally decided, and reincarnation was another thing that I had never thought about. And I was very intrigued by the idea that a soul had chosen me to be her mother. And I was really curious about this. And so I figured if she had gone to all the trouble to pick me to be her mom, then I should probably go back and do that. And I told him that I would come back. He had told me other things. I knew that I was there for 2 weeks because I call it a calendar. It wasn't really a calendar, but I understood the passage of time. I also understood that time wasn't linear. But the passage of time, now that I'm back here, I have to remember it in linear terms, or I can't decipher what happened. I have to remember it and think of it in linear terms. So there was a calendar, and what it was, there were 3 spherical bodies in the sky. I don't know if they were planets or moons or what they were, but the way they were moving in relation to each other, I understood the passage of time and how much time was passing, Earth time. And it was 2 weeks. Now, when I came back and woke up, it had only been a couple of minutes, but I know I was there for 2 weeks. I know it. And so I told him that I would come back and finish this life. And he said that's fine. He said, I have to also let you know that there's going to be a lot of physical pain because your body is burned. And when he said that, I looked at my hand that had been holding the umbrella. I wanted to see if there was a burn on my finger. And my hand, my skin was perfect. So I started looking, and I turned my hand over and everything was perfect. And I saw other people there, and everyone was paired up with someone. And everyone looked to be about 18 years old. Everyone looked perfect. and young and healthy. And I asked him while we were sitting there, why are they all paired up? And I'm not. And he said, but you are. I'm here. They're paired up with someone like me. And I said, okay. I also understood that all of us, all the people I saw there, myself, we were all in heaven. But we weren't all seeing the same thing. My heaven was a garden. That is what I would consider to be heaven. Other people there may have seen a beach or an Olympic-sized swimming pool if they were an Olympic swimmer. I don't know. I understood that we were all in heaven, but heaven was different for each one of us. He told me that when he was going to help me back into my body that was burned, I was going to have pain from the burns. And he said, but getting back into your body is going to be a painful experience because I have to squeeze you very tight, like bone-crushingly tight, because your soul has expanded. Once you were out of your body, your soul expanded. And now I've got to squeeze you back into that body. And so he did. He hugged me really tight. And it felt like every bone in my body was breaking. And then I was back. I opened my eyes and I was lying in the parking lot in the rain. And people had just started coming out to help me. I was back. And I had to spend about 3 months pretty much in bed because my feet were very burned. The lightning had gone out through the bottom of my feet, and it was painful to walk. So I spent a lot of time in bed, sleeping, and I started noticing that my dreams were different than they had been before. During those 3 months, I didn't think about what had happened. I didn't think about the NDE. I didn't think about where I had been. I was in pain, and I was very focused on my children being taken care of, which I wasn't able to do very well, and the pain that I was in. So I didn't think about the NDE and the fact that I had been somewhere and had spoken to God. But I did notice during this time that these dreams I was having were different than dreams I had ever had before. Before, I would, of course, I had dreams, but when I would wake up, they were gone. It was like sand between my fingers. The dreams would just go away and I couldn't remember them. But now, since the NDE, when I have a dream, it's concrete. It sticks with me. And so one of the dreams I had during that 3-month period of recovery was about a woman that I did not know and that she had died. And when I woke up, I was thinking, why would I have this dream? I knew who the woman was, but I didn't know her personally. She was friends with someone that I was friends with. And so I had the feeling that I should go talk to this friend and see how this woman was doing. And so I did, and it turns out that she had died probably around the same time I was having the dream about it. And I kept thinking, why would I know that? And the answer kept coming to me. And the answer was, it wasn't the information that was important. It was so that I would realize that I could know things, that I could know that things were happening outside of my physical vision. While I had been in the garden, I was told two things that seemed so petty and insignificant. One was about the upcoming Super Bowl. I had never even watched a Super Bowl in my life at that point. I didn't care about football, but I was given information about the Super Bowl, and I was also given information about the upcoming presidential election, 1988. And I was told that George H.W. Bush was going to be elected. And again, I didn't care. It wasn't important to me. I wasn't into politics. And I thought that's really petty to be in heaven and getting information like this. But then he told me it wasn't the information that I was given that was important. It's that when those events happened over the next few months, it would trigger the memory, my memory of being there in the garden and being given that information. And it worked incredibly well when George Bush was elected. It was like a floodgate opened, and I remembered everything. I remembered everything that we had talked about and all of it. And then a few weeks later, it was the Super Bowl. And again, it was just very confirming to me. People ask me a lot, like, that's just not even credible that you were talking about the Super Bowl in heaven. And I agree. It's not an important thing in the big picture, but the purpose of it was to help jog my memory. And it did. Now, it was 1989, maybe, and I started having nightmares. And the nightmares were things about natural disasters and tsunamis and earthquakes. And then I started having horrific plane crash nightmares. And when I would have these nightmares, I would tell my husband and I would tell my mom. Those were the only two people I talked to about this. And my mom was very interested, very receptive to it. My husband was not. He was very uncomfortable with the whole thing, especially when these nightmares would happen a day or two later. He was really uncomfortable, and so was I, honestly. It was freaking me out, but there was nothing I could do about it. I couldn't help it. And it wasn't until 2008 that I realized I could email myself. Back when all this started, I don't think I even had email then. But by 2008, I thought I could email myself the details of these nightmares, and then it's date and time stamped, just for my own sanity to know that, yes, I did know that before it happened, because it got to where I'm questioning myself. And anyway, in 1990, I did have a third child. I had my daughter. My husband moved out in 1997, I think. We were married for 17 years, and we ended up getting divorced. We actually have remained friends. I understand that I probably was not easy to live with, especially when I had changed so much and he hadn't. We just weren't the same people anymore. I think when you die, you see what you expect to see. And I never would have expected to see Jesus. That wasn't part of my culture. Maybe 2009. We were in Jerusalem. My son, actually the one whose hand I was holding when I was struck by lightning, he grew up to become an Orthodox rabbi. And he was studying to become a rabbi in Jerusalem. And so we had gone to visit him. And while we were there, I had one of my nightmares. And when I woke up, I started emailing it to myself. We had brought our laptop with us. And I was emailing myself the details of the nightmare, like I always did. And my husband woke up and he said, you had one of your nightmares. I said, yeah. He said, what was it? And I told him. And I said, it was different. Nobody died. It was a plane crash. Everyone survived. It crashed in water and the plane was floating and everybody standing on the wings. That's what I saw in my nightmare. And he was like, yeah, that can't happen. Planes don't float. And I'm like, I know, but that's what I saw. And the next morning, we were eating breakfast in our hotel. And on the news, he almost choked. He was sitting facing a TV. And he said, look. And I turned around and looked, and there it was. Captain Sully had landed on the Hudson River in New York, and everyone survived. They had hit a flock of birds, I think, and everyone had gotten out of the plane, and they were standing on the wings waiting to be rescued. In my second book, I did talk about one of my nightmares that I did not talk about in the first book. And there are reasons for that. There are family members that survived the crash, and I don't want to disrupt any lives. But that plane crash was particularly awful for me because it's the only one in which I felt like I was on the plane. I was on the plane as it was crashing. Usually I just see the aftermath, like a snapshot, the aftermath of a crash or disaster. And then that snapshot is the photo that appears in the news the next day or 2 days later or a week later. And one theory that has been presented to me is that maybe I'm not having dreams about the event, but I'm having dreams about the reporting of the event, like the CNN reporter reporting the event. I don't know, and I don't know that it really matters. But this one particular one was terrible. I was on the plane. I knew it was going down, and I was talking to a passenger on the plane. And she told me her name. And that name is in my email. And that plane crash happened. And when they printed a list of passengers, her name was there. And it's not anyone I knew. It's not even someone that is American. It's very unsettling to me, the whole thing. is very unsettling. I think what I'm supposed to take from it is the nonlinear nature of time and the fact that these events did happen and are still happening and will happen again. The way I see it is the time-space continuum is like a fabric, like a tapestry. And you can go to any point on that tapestry or in that tapestry or matrix or whatever you want to call it. And each point is an event. And I cannot figure out how to get to any given event, but I do feel like that event is there and it's permanent and you can go back to it or forward to it. Living in this dimension on this plane is like living in a bowl of pea soup. It's so murky and nothing is clear. Everything is trying to get through a fog. And while I was in the garden, everything was crystal clear and I understood everything. Back here, I studied business and I went to law school. That's as far from physics as you can get. And I do not understand it. I do know that time is not linear. I think that somehow these nightmares and these dreams that I have are designed to convince me of that.
How many plane crashes do you think that you've seen?
There are 27 emails. 27. But not all of them happened. When Jeff Kripal and I started working on our book, he took all of my emails and gave them to one of his grad students and had them start researching to see if they had all happened. And they hadn't. This student, I think it was something like 60% had happened.
What do you think happens after we die?
You need to recover from whatever life you just left. And then you can decide if you want to come back. And this plane, this level is, to me, it's like a school. You come here to learn, and I think you come with a set of goals in mind, certain things you want to learn or experience this time around. And they're not always good, but there's probably a reason for each of them. I think that you can decide to come back after a recovery period, a rest period. And it just continues to cycle until I think you probably reach a point somewhere thousands of lifetimes down the road where you don't have to do this anymore.
You said that you had some communication with your grandfather.
I received a phone call from him. The phone actually rang. It was 3:30 in the morning. And my husband and I were sound asleep. This was 1990. It was my first husband. I was newly pregnant with my third child. And at 3:30 in the morning, the phone rang. And these were landlines. This was a long time ago. I was pregnant and I had been chasing two little boys around all day. I was exhausted. And now the phone is ringing in the middle of the night. And I didn't want to answer it because I thought it's going to be bad news. Nobody calls you at 3:30 in the morning to tell you something good. It's going to be bad news. And my husband, it woke both of us up. So it did actually ring. And he pushed me and said, "You got to get the phone." It was on my side. So I picked it up. I said, "Hello." And it was my grandfather, French accent and all. It was him. And I said, "Oh my God, I can't believe you're calling me." And I sat up, and my husband sat up, and my husband was saying to me, "Who is it? Who is it? Who is it?" And I'm just telling him, "Shh, leave me alone." If I didn't want to take airtime away from my grandfather. And I said, "Why are you calling me?" And he said, "Oh, first I said, I have to tell you something." He said, "Oh, I already know. You're pregnant with your third child, and it's a girl, like you were told." And I was like, "Oh, okay." I said, "Then why are you calling me?" And he said, "I need you to tell your mother something. And this is my mother's father." And I said, "Okay, but why don't you just tell her?" And he said, "I can't reach her." I said, "I can give you her phone number?" I mean, I, I don't get it. Why are you calling me? And he said, "No, I have tried to talk to her and she can't hear me. But ever since you were struck by lightning, you can hear me. So I need you to tell her something." And I'm like, "Okay, what is it?" And he proceeds to tell me where a folder was hidden in a desk that he said the family needs that folder. I was like, "Okay, I'll tell her." And he said, "Thank you." I said, "Wait, don't hang up." I said, "Are you with grandma?" And he said, "Oh, yes. And she's perfect. He's happy. She died about 10 months after he did." And so he said they were together and she was happy. And I said, "Please don't hang up." And I started crying because his voice was getting very faint. I said, "Please don't." And he said, "No, I will talk to you again. This just takes a lot of energy. And I don't have enough to keep going right now." And he said, "But I need you to remember something." I said, "What?" He said, "Remember the love that you felt in the garden. Always remember the love." And I said I would. And he hung up. And as soon as he hung up, the way my husband and I in that house, we had our bed in our bedroom was facing the door, which was a long hallway. And the bedroom door was open, and we were both sitting up in bed. And as soon as he hung up the phone, the room filled with some kind of vapor, like smoke. It looked like smoke. It was very dense, but there was no smell to it. It didn't smell like smoke. And my husband and I are both sitting there. Nobody's saying anything. And I'm thinking, if this is really smoke, we should be running and getting our kids and getting out of the house. But neither of us moved. And then at the end of the hall, there was a red light. And it was like one of those laser pointers, just a point of red light. And when I saw that red light, that light carried the love. It washed over me, that feeling that I had in the garden. And then the smoke just disappeared as fast as it had appeared. And I said, "Did you see that?" And my husband said, "What smoke?" I don't have an explanation for it. He said to me then, "Who was on the phone?" he saw it, he remembered it, but he didn't know how to process it. Neither did I. At the time, it was pretty unsettling, but I think that people that have died, they still exist. They're still here. They're just in a dimension that we can't see with our physical eyes, but they're still here. You don't disappear. And I've had many experiences since then of people contacting me, not by phone. That was the only time that a phone actually rang and I spoke to someone, but I am contacted frequently by people on the other side, or souls on the other side, I should say. And I think that it's not uncommon. People aren't raised to look for that. You have to be open to it, and you have to look for it in your life. And if you're looking and you're open to it, you'll see it. You'll feel it. You'll get it. There's nothing special about me. Every human is built with the ability to do this. Before my near-death experiences, I was so cynical that I wouldn't have seen it. I wouldn't have recognized it when it happened. And I think that's pretty much all there is to it. You just have to be looking for it and see it, recognize it for what it is when it happens. My mom died several years ago, and it's me reaching out to her saying, Mom, send me a sign. I need to know you're there, and here's what I want. Either I'll say, I want to see a yellow butterfly go by, or I want to find a nickel on the ground, or whatever it is. And then whatever it is will happen. And it just lets me know she's still there. And it's very comforting. If you specifically ask for a sign and your loved one is there, they're going to do whatever they can to see to it that your comfort and your happiness is very important to your loved ones on the other side. My goal is always just to let people know that consciousness survives death. That's it, in a nutshell. People don't disappear. They're still here.